enthralling. As the fog was lifting, a voice was chanting, this land was made for you and me. Okay, these are... Okay, well, I don't want to overpower him in the singing. Oh. I wasn't holding the mic close enough. I didn't want to overpower you. It's not about me. I want people to sing out here and want to be able to hear you up here. All right. Last time we were here, we sang "We Shall Not Be Moved," and people really liked that. And so I wrote some new verses to it this time. So the first thing we'll do is we'll sing the chorus, and then when we get to the verses, I'll sing the first line of the verse, and you can finish it off. So. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Seeking truth and justice, we shall not be moved. Saving our democracy, we shall not be moved, just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be moved. We're fighting Trump's racist wall, and we shall not be moved. We're all together standing tall, we shall not be moved, just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be moved. We're standing for asylum rights. We shall not be moved. But Trump will not see the light. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be moved. Trump's threatening our democracy. We shall not be moved. We'll defend law and order. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be moved. We're standing for our children. We shall not be moved. And for our country's future. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be moved. Let's change key. Commitments not we need now. We shall not be moved. To save the Constitution, we shall not be moved. Just like a tree standing by the waters. We shall not be moved. We will remain nonviolent. We shall not be moved. But we will stay determined. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be moved. I'm going to introduce Judy here, and she has the announcements. She's sort of heading this thing up this time. She and Mary work together as kind of co-chairman of Move On, and so she's kind of running things today here. So, Judy?
Thank you, Ron. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Okay, looks like we're good. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. We are coming together today to defend our democracy and defend the immigrant, Muslim, black and brown communities from Trump's dangerous national emergency power grab. Donald Trump is creating a fake crisis. There is no national emergency at the U.S.-Mexican border. Trump is grossly overreaching to push his racist, dangerous policies, including bullying Congress and the American people into accepting the racist and unpopular wall. The only crisis on the U.S. border is Mexican border is the one caused by the Trump administration's cruel policies. Ripping kids from their parents, locking them in jails, changing the rules, and criminalizing the legal right to seek asylum, and tear gassing women and children. This is an undemocratic power grab from an unhinged man, unhappy with a Democratic Congress that will not indulge his temper tantrums. So I'd like you all to remember when you go home today, tell our representatives, stop Trump's racist wall scheme and out-of-control deportation force. Treat all immigrant families with respect and dignity. Call your reps and senators and tell them not to accept this fake national emergency and power grab. Now, each time we meet, we have expenses that the leadership team has mostly been paying for. And the big expense is the sound system. We also have to rent a generator. We have never asked for any help before, but today we are requesting that if you are able to give a voluntary donation of a couple dollars, we have people with orange vests, and they will circulate among you with a red container. So thank you very much. You can, well, thank you for any help that you can give us.
I'm really interested in that because this sound system or the generator is on my credit card today.
Well, it's time for me to introduce our speaker, Carolyn Long. She was the Democratic nominee for Congress, 3rd District in 2018. She lives in Vancouver and teaches at WSU Vancouver. She grew up in Oregon, attending Brookings Harbor High School and the University of Oregon. She worked at her family's produce store and helped pay for her college by working as an assistant produce manager at Safeway. And she received a PhD in political science at Rutgers University. In 1995, Carolyn was hired by Washington State University. She has worked there ever since, both as a professor and in several administrative and leadership positions. She has received many awards, including the Washington State University's President's Award for Leadership and Engagement. And in 2017, she was honored as a woman in the community who has promoted civil discourse, teamwork, collaboration, and cooperation. We are proud that she has stepped forward to carry the banner for change in our congressional district representation. Please welcome Carolyn Long.
Thank you. Let me begin by thanking Move On for inviting me here to speak to you and for getting me out of retirement. It was a short retirement. I also want to mention that my views don't represent Washington State University Vancouver, but rather I'm here with you as a fellow citizen concerned about what is happening in the presidency. So let's begin by honoring the presidencies that we've had in the past, in particular George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. These are men who served office humbly and responsibly, and they're ones that we emulate and hope to emulate in the White House every time we have an election. So I thought I would begin with a quote from one of them, and I'll end with a quote from another, just to remind us about what good presidencies look like, and ones that we're honoring today. George Washington said, and I think this is notable for this afternoon, "If freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to slaughter." It's important we remember how important freedom of speech is, and we're doing that today as we gather here at Esther Shore Park. He also said, "Guard against the impostures of pretend patriotism." So let's begin with that. I did a Facebook post the other day, my first step out of retirement, on the emergency declaration. And one of the things that I mentioned is that often on the campaign trail we hear candidates talk about patriotism, a rule of law, and the Constitution. But often we invoke those words, but we don't necessarily see it in the actions of individuals. And I would argue that we're not seeing it in the actions of the President of the United States with his emergency declaration. So that pretend patriotism is something we have to be wary of, but I think we also need to emulate good patriotism by voicing our concerns when we see a presidency out of control, by being involved in our community like we are today. So I do want to talk about that and speak about where I think we've gone astray. As many of you know, I teach constitutional law at Washington State University. And over the last 20 years, I've talked about how the presidency has been growing in power at the expense of our representative forms of government, particularly Congress. And so this has been happening for decades, but we've really seen it accelerate under the presidency of Donald J. Trump. And it's done so in a dangerous, scary way that I think threatens the very roots of our democracy. And one of the things that I mentioned in my posting is that it's unfortunate that this has occurred with the complicity of members of Congress, right? It's not just the president who has done this power grab, but it's actual leaders in Congress as well as members who've allowed it to happen. I see a gentleman in the back has got McConnell GOP gutless sign here. Mitch McConnell's been known as an institutionalist, somebody who really does care about the institution of Congress, even if you disagree with his views. But he has signed on to this power grab by the administration. And so let's call it for what it is, which is a blatant power grab with the complicity of Republicans who care more about their own re-election than about stopping this president. So we even see people like Mitch McConnell sort of capitulate, and we've seen other members do that as well. So it's a problem, and it's one that's been happening, as I mentioned, for decades. But let's talk about the last 2 years. Donald Trump, whether you agree with him or don't agree with him, has really grown the office of the presidency to a level that we've not seen in terms of authority in the executive branch. And that is very frightening, because we are governed by a constitution which talks about checks and balances and separation of power. And that's what undergirds our democracy. That is why our democracy functions. And if we don't support the separation of powers and checks and balances, you're going to continue to see a president take power again and again and again. It started with his inaugural address, where he spoke in such an authoritative manner, trying to tell us that only he could solve the problems of America. And I think that we can say now that that's really not happening, is it? But again, he's been able to do this because overall, Republicans in Congress have allowed it to occur. So I'm here to talk about the importance of us rising up and joining organizations to call out this president for what he's doing. One of the things that's so concerning about what's happening right now is we have a president who is invoking a national emergency because his feelings were hurt. He was unable to get the funding that he wanted for the wall, despite the fact that the Republicans controlled both houses of Congress, and he was unable to match Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer in the negotiations after we opened up the government. And so, failing to achieve what he wanted through the regular democratic process, he declares a national emergency. So I think it's very important that we remind everybody that this is a vanity project for the president. And he supports it by lies, by misrepresenting facts, and by a manufactured crisis while he golfs at Mar-a-Lago. So it is very important that we look at this as the beginning of yet another